The school year is back in full swing, and Janae, that can only mean one thing.
College football is back, baby, which means our Red Zone to End Zone team will continue to work hard to provide you the latest college football news and updates throughout the season. Thank you for joining us. I'm Janae Muchmore.
And I'm Brandon Williams. We are geared up for another exciting season, but before we start talking about the team talent, I think Janae has some predictions.
Don't get too excited. One of the things I love about college football is how unpredictable it is. And let me just start by saying week one will be one to remember. You have Alabama and FSU squaring off in Atlanta in what many believe could be the prelude to this year's championship.
A popular opinion is these two teams will see each other in a championship game, but I won't say these are the two teams that I have going to a championship game. I need at least 6 weeks to say who will go.
I won't comment on the championship just yet, but here's an interesting stat for you. Brandon, do you know who holds the longest opening game win streak?
The Florida Gators.
The Florida Gators. And they are playing the Michigan Wolverines in Texas, who destroyed them during the 2016 Citrus Bowl by 41-7. They just might put an end to that streak, but I do like how Mac is starting to step things up a bit in the season opener.
Well, I think the more important question is, do you know what colors you'll be wearing at the end of the season when you lose our College Pick'em Challenge?
Orange and blue, because I'm not going to lose.
I think you mean garnet and gold.
The season hasn't even started, and the trash talking has already begun. Brandon is referring to an annual bet we make, and you can be a part of it too. Just sign up for our ESPN College Pick'em Challenge.
You can download the ESPN Fantasy app and register for Red Zone and End Zone group within the College Pick'em Challenge. Every week, you'll be assigned to pick the winner of 10 games they provide. You get a point for every correct answer, and if you are the victor at the end of the season, we will give you $30 cash.
As for Brandon, whoever loses will be forced to go out into the Plaza of the Americas sporting some hideous Seminole attire, where the loser will be harassed by fellow students. But if you need some help making those picks, we've got you covered with our weekly college football previews every Friday evening. But for now, we're about to give you a preview of the top 20 going into the 2017 season.
And here's a quick piece of advice. Steer clear of Janae's picks. The Pac-12 has been growing in strength along the years and has fielded some elite teams, but have done it with a different team last year.
That's right, Brandon. The Huskies surprised everyone last year with a dominant performance, and they made it to the semifinals, though they aren't the favorite this year as USC shows up on the scene.
The Pac-12 had 6 teams that went to bowl games last season and posted a record of 3-3. The last champions that they had were the 2004 USC Trojans. Since then, it's been kind of a dry spell for the conference. They look to change that this year. The USC Trojans will be eager to take the field as they come off a huge win against Penn State in the Rose Bowl, which became an instant classic.
A team with a lot of hype coming into the season, with many projecting them to be the Pac-12 champion and make it to the playoffs.
They play an interesting season opener against Western Michigan, who could catch them off guard. But that isn't for our preseason show, that's for next week.
USC isn't really the most experienced team, but returns several specialists, including AP preseason first-team All-American quarterback Sam Darnold.
However, Darnold loses a huge threat in wide receiver Juju Smith, who was a 3-time All-Pac-12 team member. They also lose tight end Darius Rogers. This means USC loses their 2 best wide receivers.
That's true, but with Ronald Jones returning as tailback, he will give the team more passing options, as teams will try to stack the box to keep him from running all day long.
The offense will be aided with a highly experienced offensive line, who is a huge highlight as they return 73 starts as a collective unit.
They do return a bunch of starters on defense, returning a total of 7, with one of the most solid linebacker units in the nation. As a unit, they return Cameron Smith, Porter Gustin, and Uchenna Nwosu, respectively the number 1, 2, and 6 leading tacklers last year.
While USC also boasts one of the best secondary units in the country, they return Iman Marshall, Chris Hawkins, and Marvel Tell. These units post some of the most eligible players according to the mock drafts.
Be an interesting team to watch and may be dethroned from all the hype as they play Stanford, Texas, Notre Dame, and UCLA.
While I predict that they will be in the playoffs, they have a dominant quarterback, experienced offensive line, and explosive tailbacks. Their defense is not too shabby either.
They won't live up to their hype. Stanford is going to beat them in Week 2, and they will struggle to bounce back. But before we discuss how Stanford is looking as we head to Week 1, it's now time for Washington.
The Washington Huskies made a name for themselves last year, starting off the season in the top 15 for the first time since 2002.
And they are coming in hot this season with a fresh Pac-12 title. With a fairly easy schedule in the opening weeks, Jake Browning has plenty of time to get things rolling offensively.
Here's the good news. They returned 8 offensive starters, and the intended replacements for those positions have had decent exposure to the style and offensive play of Washington.
But all eyes remain on Browning, who had a career-best season during his sophomore year. He set single records with 43 touchdown passes and a passer efficiency rating of 167.
Browning will have plenty of help in the backfield with the return of Myles Gaskin and Lavon Coleman, who combined rushed for more than 2,200 yards last season. But his go-to wide receiver John Ross has moved on to the big leagues.
With or without him, most of the receiving core is back for more, which is allowing Browning to retain the creativity and dual action throughout this season. The offensive ranked 5th in passing efficiency and 8th in scoring last season.
Now, if only they could improve the run game, the Huskies will continue to light it up.
That's pretty accurate. The only 2 losses they had last season were against Alabama and USC, and combined the total rushing yards was 61. But let's not forget about the Husky defense, which gave them the rise in power to begin with.
And the defensive unit that held opponents to less than 28 points per game and ranked 12th overall with returned 7 starters, but the 4 they lost will be hard to replace as they say goodbye to Elijah Qualls, corners Sidney Jones and Kevin King, and last but not least, Budda Baker.
Well, the secondary was certainly a concern at first, but they look strong in the offseason. It will be vital for them to get the secondary together. The Huskies were 1 game away from a championship title. Now that they've had a taste of the playoffs, I think they will make it to the playoffs again, but only this time they'll advance.
Well, that's where you're wrong. USC is actually going to take them on in the Pac-12 title game and, well, effectively end their career.
The Stanford Cardinals are coming back from a 10-3 season, ready to go. Though this may be the biggest highlight and overstated mention of the offseason, what is Stanford going to do without Christian McCaffrey?
This may change the dynamics for Stanford as the quarterback wasn't even a huge name. In fact, a majority of the college football world would have to pause and think about it. Both Christ and Burns were horrible. Though, with such a dynamic run force leaving, they will have to pick up the workload.
Their running backs have a huge role to fill and are putting the pressure on replacement Bryce Love, who ran for 783 yards and averaged 7.1 yards a carry.
But the biggest problem is that they don't have a second running back option to fill in as Love becomes the number 1 option. This leaves a void that needs to be filled, and that is a big question that Stanford has to answer.
The defense returns 8 starters from a squad that held their opponents to 20.4 points per game. This could be a way for Stanford to keep competitive after losing their superstar.
The highlight of this defense is the linebacker core, which is one of the nation's best. They return 7 members to the group and have a 6-man rotation. With an additional year of experience, they are going to be a force to be reckoned with.
Stanford also has one of the best secondary units in the nation. They return their cornerbacks Elijah Holder and Quentin Meeks for an additional season. They also have size, both of them measuring up to 6'2", which causes them to be able to shut down even the tallest wide receivers.
I see that Stanford will be a really good team, but that offensive insecurity concerns me. It gives me the edge to USC to win the Pac-12. They have the capability, but I don't see it happening.
That concerns me too. My standard rule of thumb is you have to give a quarterback 1 season to fully transition to the college game. Then you can continue to develop them in the offseason. However, USC is out, and I say the Huskies are in.
Well, that concludes our show for the AP Top 20.
Don't forget to tune in next week. We'll be covering your Week 1 college football preview featuring the best games of the week. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at BJ_RedZone, where we'll have all the updates and game coverage. Have a good night.